And the only way to do that is to do research. I think most of you probably can't see the little cartoon at the top. It's a picture of a little baby up in heaven and an old person up in heaven. The old person says, I waited a long time for stem cell research to find a cure. No, it says, I'm waiting for embryonic stem cell research to find a cure. But of course he died. And he asked the young person, what happened to you? And the young person said, well, I was the embryo. So I want to briefly talk about the 4 areas where stem cell research is being carried out right now. The bench research is the area that has by far been the well studied. There now have been well over 10,000 scientific articles in peer-reviewed journals that have described all the different stem cell therapies we've talked about. This literature is coming from U.S. laboratories and many other laboratories overseas. Universities have been funding this with a lot of big dollars, and companies have been pouring a lot of private capital into this research. And there have been many patents issued in this area. However, when you come to animal studies, there aren't nearly as many studies. There are a lot of them in the U.S. and a lot of them overseas, and I think one of the reasons for this is that part of the research is being done in the animal model purely for research, but a lot of it's being done actually within veterinary circles to actually treat animals. And one of my patients is a veterinarian, and I remember talking with her as I was seeing her post-op in the office, and I said, hey, what do you think about stem cells? We're very interested. She said, oh, you guys are 10 years behind us. And I said, what do you mean? I said, I've been using stem cells for 6 years. And if you go to a veterinary convention for veterinary medicine, you'll find that stem cell therapy is now standard therapy for dogs, for horses, for cats. This is no longer experimental. It's being used to treat a whole variety of conditions, not for research, but for clinical applications. The safety of using stem cells in animals has been proven. The efficacy has been proven for many different applications. Fortunately, not as many patents have been issued for stem cell therapy in animals. I think probably because there's not as many dollars in veterinary medicine as there are in human. Of course, the area that you're probably the most interested in, and I am, is human trials, specifically trials to see what we can do with these stem cells. Unfortunately, there haven't been a lot of these that have been completed yet. There's been a lot started. And if you want to go to clinicaltrials.org, which is the government clearinghouse for clinical trials of human with stem cells, you'll see a lot of studies there. I don't have the time to go through all this with you tonight. In the future, I would like to have a guest speaker who specifically talks about clinical trials in humans. But this is the area really where I am personally becoming very involved. Not only am I doing clinical trials and using stem cells in the OR for plastic and reconstructive surgery patients, but I am involved with using stem cells for clinical trials with companies that can actually culture these cells and then use them for therapeutic. Unfortunately, the safety and the efficacy has not been completely cleared up. Now, when I say unproven in this slide, I'm not saying that nothing has been proven. I'm just saying that in peer-reviewed journals, the FDA is not convinced yet that enough safety and efficacy studies have been done. The biggest problem in human studies is really government regulation of research. Now, there's another whole area that probably should not be on this slide, but I'm putting it on here because I want all of you to be aware that there's a lot of clinical use of stem cells already in humans. This is not being done as part of a research study under any institutional review board, but is being done clinically in thousands of patients. Right now, from what I can tell, over 10,000 patients have been treated with stem cells worldwide. And several of those people are here in this room tonight. Most all of these patients have been treated overseas. So far, from what I can tell, there have been 0 deaths. There's been 1 cancer reported, and I don't know if cancer is the correct term because it was really a benign tumor, It occurred in a young Israeli child who was treated with embryonic stem cells in Moscow a few years ago. And there really isn't enough evidence to show a cause and effect relationship with this. But that one case report has been cited over 176 times in the literature. So it's really a word of warning to all of us in this area that we cannot afford to make the same mistakes that gene therapy made in the 1990s with this promising new technology. Probably the main problem with this non-IRB clinical use of stem cells, however, is the fact that there is no scientific reporting. Today, scientific journals are so concerned about fraud and about ethical issues and informed consent that unless a study is done with Institutional Research Board approval, an IRB, you cannot get it published in a peer-reviewed journal. You can report it as an anecdotal case in a website ad. You can send out flyers, and you can do all kinds of advertising for yourself. But you're not going to get your results published unless there is IRB approval. And to be honest with you, that's the primary reason why I'm here. It's because I have a very strong interest in bringing stem cells to the doctor's office, but doing it with an IRB approval. And I have a very strong interest in finding other physicians who are interested in participating in something like that. Now, what are the barriers to stem cell research here in the U.S.? Well, you can divide them into governmental and non-governmental factors. The governmental ones are primarily regulation. I think most of you are already familiar with the FDA. There are also regulations on transport of tissue from one location to another. And for instance, if you are a blood bank, you have to have a special license to transfer blood from one location to another. So we may end up finding out that transporting cells from the doctor's office to the stem cell culture laboratory or to the hospital in itself may face horrendous governmental hurdles. The government has already set up two sets of guidelines and regulations, one called Good Manufacturing Principles, GMP, which govern part of stem cell therapy in the lab, and the other is Good Tissue Processing. Are we running out of time? Okay, I'm almost done here. Then there are a lot of other non-government factors that, in my opinion, have slowed things down. IRBs are committees that you have to get approval for, and it takes a lot of time and effort to get something approved. Patents have become a sticking point. There are huge delays in getting patents issued by the U.S. Patent Office, and more important, there's all kinds of lawsuits that are going over now on intellectual property things. Other non-governmental factors are the high cost of doing research and public ignorance about this. In conclusion, the U.S. is being left out of the development of stem cell therapy in clinical use. The U.S. government, academic institutions, corporations have all been limited by rules, regulation, patent disputes, and the cost of doing research and development. And my personal feeling is they will not be able to overcome these barriers to get these new promising things to the doctor's office. And I do not want to be left behind, and that's why we're here tonight to talk to you. My personal opinion on stem cell therapy is that embryonic stem cell therapy has the most promise, but also the most problems. Umbilical stem cells, amniotic stem cells, are easy to obtain, but do have tissue typing limitations and telomerase limitations. Tissue-specific stem cells hold enormous promise, but are difficult to harvest and may be involved in cancer formation. Adipose-derived stem cells are probably the safest, easiest to harvest, most economical and abundant. And because of these factors, they may override the advantages of these other groups. Now, in conclusion, my feeling is these other cells are not quite ready for prime time. They're not ready for the doctor's office. On the other hand, I do think that adipose-derived stem cells all are ready for clinical trials done under IRB approval here in the U.S. For those who wish to personally, though, have stem cell therapy, and want to go under stem cell therapy outside of an IRB-approved research, at this time, you're pretty much going to have to go outside of the U.S. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm going to turn things over to Nora May now.
Thank you, Dr. Watson.